Welcome back to our committee, Deputy Commissioner. We all had a wide variety of questions for you that came up yesterday with various other witnesses who said, I don't know, ask CDD. So far,
Yes.
and I don't know if you've heard rumors of them or if it's helpful for us to just take turns asking you questions.
I did listen to you all speak very quickly on double time last night to hear the questions that came up in the room yesterday. So I'm happy to, I guess, just dive in.
Bill? Popcorn.
We're still on popcorn. We start with Representative Taylor, who's been the most persistent in his questions.
Oh, okay. Basically, I'm just looking for an explanation of how the CCFAP subsidy is calculated.
The part that goes to providers.
Yep.
How you determine how much money you send to providers.
Okay, well, so right now we have the programs set, we have a provider, there's a bunch of factors that go into it. So right now we have a capped rate that that is established. And so that varies by age, by the number of, that varies by age, that varies by the sort of the number of hours of care that are associated, and it varies by setting, and it varies by STARS level. So it's a lot. We're proposing, right, removing STARS level from how that variation is set up. But that right now, the way it's set up is that programs, you know, they do tell us what their usual and customary rate is. And so we will pay up to their usual and customary rate, you know, for a child in that setting category, in that age group, at that time commitment, or up to our maximum, because some programs, that maximum capped rate. And that capped rate is designed to be set on the methodology we use is based on a market rate survey, is how it's been done in Vermont. And that is, so it's set at 75% of the market rate, or 75th percentile, which means that a family who's using child care financial assistance should be able to have access to 75% of the child care programs in the state based on the amount that the state is paying. Has set at that market rate. You know, a family's weekly family share is deducted from the amount that the state would pay, and that the family pays that weekly family share directly to the provider.
And go ahead.
How was that cap set? You said there's a cap. Is that set by you or by the federal government or by whom?
It's set by the state with the methodology that is with this market rate survey methodology. It's how the cap is set, and right now it's set. It's designed to be set at that 75th percentile of the market rate.
And that the methodology is state defined.
It is. There's also, you can also do a cost of care methodology, but you'd have to have a way that you're officially calculating cost of care, and the feds have to approve that. Same with the market rate survey is the methodology we have used that is approved by the federal government already, but we have to have a way and get it approved.
So I'm trying to get clear as to how much is determined by the state and how much is determined by the federal, how restricted we are and what we can do in terms of increasing or decreasing that amount that we pay the providers.
So we are not, the federal guidance is that we shouldn't drop below the 75th percentile of the market rate as the program standard, but in terms of going above it, they they don't say a lot about that, about whether we can go above that. I mean, like you can, they don't tell you set a limit on the top.
And is there any distinction between the federal money and the state money, that federal money can be used for some things, state money can only be used for some things? Is there a mix, or how does that work?
Yeah, so right now, right, so the different, let's see, I printed some of this off, right? So there are, right now we treat it as, there is there is a state match requirement, right? So we do have to put some money in. The state does do that, right, against the same rules. So those are state dollars that do need to follow those federal rules. And the question is, for those dollars that are above the match, like what flexibility is there? And so, so far, from the state's perspective, we want to create, right, like a consistent program across, with the dollars that are available for all families, no matter what kind of, what their specific situation is, right? So that we can maximize the federal dollars. And so that does include dollars that are coming from the Child Care Development Fund, but it also includes TANF dollars. It also that are used for Reach Up families. It includes money that's coming from via the Family Service Division for children that are connected to the foster care system. So it is, I wish it were not like a super simple to untangle, but it's not quite. I think there are questions of if you started to sort of make one rule for people that are getting federal funding stream and another rule for programs that are for people who are not getting, whose funds might be coming through state funds, you could end up sort of treating maybe people with resources differently than you're treating, with more financial resources differently than you're treating people that have less financial resources. And I think there's some serious, there'd be some serious questions to sort of grapple with if we headed down that road.
Okay, good, thanks, Sunny.
Okay.
That's helpful.
So I think you described how you set rates to providers under current law.
Yes.
If and when this bill passes, how would you set rates?
So my understanding, right, is that and I did double check this I did double check on the CCDF side of like, are we allowed to do like a one-time market rate adjustment? Like from a CCDF perspective, that's not tied directly to the market rate survey. Our legal said, yes, it looks like, I don't see anything prohibiting us from doing that. We still do the market rate survey so that we can say back to the feds, hey, based on how much we're paying, we're at the 90th percentile, right? Or we're exceeding that threshold. They have a 75%. We're still going to have to do that part of it. But my sense is for this one-time rate adjustment, right, that will be sort of a new day. And then it sounds like there is then we know that there's built into this bill is a annual adjustment to like increase rates every year. So I think that is going to be would be new for the program to implement that. And so I guess, to be honest, I don't know, so what does that mean for 2 or 3 years from now, how we would set the rates in the future? I don't think we haven't said that means we're going to switch methodologies at this point. We would still be looking back at the market rate survey and sort of say, have we still accomplished? At this moment, there's not a plan to change it. It's absolutely something we could look at. But it's tricky if you've got cost of care as your methodology and then you can't afford to pay full cost of care, then you can be pushed into wait lists, which is what some other states have had happen.
Pushed into wait lists, so you said. So did the Human Services, the RAND study, which we're sort of basing all of this on, is cost of care. And so I'm curious what conversations with other committees have looked like about this.
Right, what we know, what's in the governor's budget, right, is to decouple STARS and child care financial assistance. Right now, about 70, I think, so that everybody's moving up to that 5-star rate, and that I think it's 74% of, I think that's right. I think 26% of programs are already at 5-star, so they wouldn't necessarily see that bump in rates. But 74% of programs should see a bump in their rates just by that, and that's what the proposal from the administration is.
Thanks.
Can I bring up one other, sorry, quick thing related to this?
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry, which is just that in another element to the bill that got added in House Human Services was a cap on how much programs can increase their rates. And so it just was trying to think through what would be the timing related to this big bump in to the one-time rate adjustment that the legislature is proposing, and the timing of that related to the timing of when programs are told that they can't raise their rates by a certain by more than whatever the standard that's in there, 1.5
Yes,
times a
that
CPU
is-
or something. So
That is flagged here in Lazy
Okay.
Beans, and we are, Katie built out the beginning of a timeline for us, so
Okay.
we can see how all the things line up. And then, I'm gonna ask JFO to enter that timeline with sort of where they see different trigger points for money moving. And
Okay.
hoping that we can make sure that we don't have any anomalies in the space time.
Okay.
With our statute. Thank you.
Okay.
Representative Brennan.
So I have a couple of questions. First, along that same line, if this bill is passed into law, we're going to need a lot of new workers in this field. What is your sense about the market out there, the people who are potentially going to be interested in applying to work in either daycare or in the 4-year-old preschool?
Mm-hmm. Let's see. I think that, I think there are a lot of people who love working with young children and who would love to be early childhood educators. And we know that the wages haven't allowed them to do that work. And there's many people who have chosen other fields, or they have 3 jobs or whatever it is to allow them to do that work. So there is like field specific pressure specifically related to wages that we really, I do think increased the rate increases that were implemented just this year, the stabilization grants that are coming, that it came from ARPA, like that have helped programs be able to offer some of the wages that are needed. And then, but then we also know there's just the broader demographic trends, right? Of like, we don't have, like, people are retiring, right? This is like a workforce. People can't find housing even if they want to come work, right? So it's like, it's tied to the broader demographic trends either. Also, I will also offer, though, my understanding is that CCV has has the largest crop of early childhood educators in their programs that they've ever had, and that they have, and it is the largest, degree or credential that CCV offers. So, to the extent that there are people interested in doing this work, getting the training to do the work, I think that there are some hopeful signs there as well.
Yeah, we've heard about CCV, and that is very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So my other question regards readiness. And in the sense of our bill, readiness applies to property, whether the facilities are ready to accept all these little children and are safe. So what happens if a private home that's now a registered daycare makes improvements using some of this money, and then down the road in a year or 2 or 6 months, whatever, decides they don't want to be in daycare anymore? What happens to that improvement?
Mm-hmm.
That was state money that they used.
Yeah.
To get their home.
I mean, that is a very good question, I guess. And this has been an issue that has come up forever about family, about any supports that are offered to family childcare homes or to places where, to any sort of privately operated business, right? Like if it's a nonprofit, they have a mission to keep the money in the system, or at least in the charitable sphere. But and so that has been a place where sometimes it is felt to family childcare homes that they are being held to a different standard than other kinds of programs in terms of having access to some of the grants, because again, the grants are for upgrades to their personal home, right? But my understanding is the way that, this is part of what was designed by your colleagues, and that there's not a structure that would pull that back. My understanding is in the past, sometimes when we've done these kind of grants, we do say, do you have an intention to operate for at least another 12 months or another 24 months. And there sort of is a self-attestation that people have, that they say that is what it is. But sort of when they, if they took the money and then still closed, I mean, I guess people are like, well, they weren't making as much money as they should have for the last 20 years they were open. And we just kind of, don't try to claw it back.
So there's no plan for a clawback?
Well, this is your plan. This isn't the administration's plan in terms of the readiness grants. But I can tell you that historically, I don't believe there's been there's been a way that people have felt like it was feasible to do that.
Okay, thanks.
There's certainly other places in statute where we ask people to sort of make up a promise of sorts or other grants that we do,
Mm-hmm.
that people make up a promise to be.
I'll try to look at some of those
Like
statements.
that's
Mm-hmm.
like we just have that new student loan forgiveness programs.
Mm-hmm. Can I offer one more thing? My understanding of the readiness grants as I was reading it is that it does also include like getting the staff in place. It's not just about the facilities, but it
yes.
is also about like making sure you have the staff in place, or what are the other systems that a program would need.
Yeah, Golly, there were a lot of things listed. It's in section 8.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah, section 8 of the bill. And you're right. You're absolutely right. There are a lot of other things, but that one, I don't know, got my attention because, yeah.
And that's where I will offer, and then I offered this feedback in House Human Services, is we do have a separate capacity building grant program. And so, I mean, I've been thinking about like, what is that interaction between what these readiness grants say and our existing capacity building grant program? And because the capacity building, the grants that are about people's expansion, sustaining and maintaining spots from a like facilities perspective, we typically have that. Those often take a long time. There is risk associated with them. And so historically, those have had a little bit more vetting associated with it. I hope that the intention of the vetting is to make sure people are getting the support that they need to make a really good business plan and good business decisions around it. And that they are, and also just the idea that like people aren't kind of getting out over their skis and, asking for the money, big money to build something without having, maybe done the work to make sure that they've got the other systems in place again, to make sure they've got the people to do, that they have a plan for how they might have the people to do the work or have the other elements of their system set up.
And is it the agency that does that review?
We are active parts of the review process, and we have partnerships. We do grant making. And so for after school programs, we do that with Vermont After School, and for childcare programs, Lesker Kids has managed that capacity building, but their staff members from DCF that are on that team. And then they consult directly with licensing, because there's a lot of licensing related, concerns to make sure that the programs are thinking through everything that they would need.
Okay, great, thanks.
Representatives.
Yeah, thanks. So I think these are really good questions, and maybe using some of those models that like for a certain amount of time and making a commitment to sort of be operation would maybe make sense to me. I just want to echo Representative Taylor's question. I think, right, we're talking about transformational change, and at some point probably looking back at what the market has done is not really the right track. We're trying to get to adequately funding sort of the cost there, and that we might want to think about when and how we make that shift. Appreciate those questions. Janet, you and I have talked about this a little bit, but just want to dig into a little bit more about the CCFIP eligibility for families. Obviously, a sort of two wage earner eligibility process is going to be the simplest. There's the W-2s, there's the hours worked, and kind of move through that process. I'd like to hear a little bit more about a scenario where you might have a part-time wage earner, or the issues around self-employment, and also curious about how we handle folks who might have seasonal employment, where maybe the hours of work change from one season to another, or the wages maybe change significantly one season to another.
Yes. Okay. So I think in terms of seasonal workers, they are, people can ask for redetermination sort of at any time. And so they could submit to more, like they would submit their next, for wage earners, right? They would submit their next W-2s and say, actually, my wages changed, my hours changed, and they would ask for a redetermination. People do go back, we can backdate like a childcare certificate, so that, which is what people, a CCFAP certificate, so that that's what, so we do backdate that, so that if somebody can recover those earnings. There are places where, especially for people who have changes that have employment that really swings, they do know their eligibility specialist, right? So they're in active touch. And we actually have a lot of like short-term and temporary certificates, right? So for somebody who needs something for that week they need something during the holiday break, or, so there for some families, it really ends up being a pretty active relationship, which I know probably doesn't sound great, but ultimately it does mean that they have they get clear on what the process is together. But I'm not sure I fully answered your question, but.
No, so I hear you saying, if, I work at a ski resort in the winter and I have one wage, I apply based on my family's current income at that time. And then when I leave the ski resort and I go work on a farm, I reapply. And then when I go back to the ski resort,
and I think it doesn't have to be like a full reapplication process. I guess I would say it's just like you're talking to your eligibility specialist and you're saying, these are my changes and here's a little documentation. I don't know that it's not a full new application.
And then need to do that month to month rather than annually. Is that a federal requirement?
I don't know the answer to your question.
Okay.
I guess.
And then sort of similar, I'll go back to you just one second. The way, in the bill, I know there's an attention to making sure that there's childcare financial assistance available for asylees and refugees.
Yes.
And so are there other ways that we sort of wall off state funding for CCFAP in order to make sure that we're like able to both meet federal guidelines and meet Vermont's policy goals?
Yeah. So I would say right now the answer is no. So I would say though, I want to just offer one point of clarification, which is that there are people who are non-citizens who receive childcare financial assistance. So right, if they are eligible for the program, as long, for people that can, that we can see their refugee status and we can see their immigration status. So and we do have also we have something called a program called Family Support Childcare, right? So people who are, newly arrived refugees, like they can very quickly automatically be approved for, for childcare financial assistance. So I know we've been talking about it sort of as like the non-citizen program, but I want to be clear that non-citizens can currently participate, and that what we're talking about here is for people whose citizenship status can't be verified. But we want to, and the discussion that we had on the House side was that, we are supportive of making sure those children can get the services that, can receive early care and learning and be in safe, high quality environments. And so we are, with your guidance, we'll figure out how to do that. And I think that we're supposed to sort of come back with what that plan would be. And what we told the House Human Services is that we might need to come back next January and say, okay, we've looked into it, and we're going to need, this clarification in the law, or, something additional at that time.
Thanks. Yeah, Representative.
Just wanted to loop back around the sort of part-time piece. Can you just walk us through eligibility where you might have
Sure. Thank you.
one parent and one part-time?
Yeah. So they do. So let's see. So when you're filling out your childcare financial assistance application, right, it does ask for the work schedule of both parent, of the available caregivers in the home. And so you, and then they look at that and figure out how much care is needed. And it's set in pretty big tranches. It's set as, 25 hours a week or less, 25 to I think 50 hours, and then more than 50 hours. And so if there is a parent that is available a part of the time, then you get a part-time certificate. And if there's a parent, and if there's not, then then you get the full-time certificate. But it's based on the work schedule. They add in travel time, and people put in their schedule like by the day.
It sounds like you're determining available solely based on whether you have full or part-time employment, and that cultural needs or births of new children or other unpaid labor is not. I think that is accurate, that unpaid labor is not included on the list. I will say there is, again, this family support childcare does support, it is there to support families that might have an unusual circumstance that may require them, some other significant sort of family stressor that would necessitate more hours or childcare in general. So it's like if I don't know, like a mom has postpartum depression, right? Like that could come through there, right? And she's there, she's caring for that little one, but she needs, right? Like she can't, anyway, so that's like an example of something that might come through family support childcare. So there are some other ways to get through that. But, and then there are people who have work in, education, you can also have, be in a training program as well and doing educational needs as well.
Last question.
And then.
Can you just walk us through the self-employment calculation around hours?
Yes, actually, I cannot. Catherine, you probably know it better than I do. But I think in terms, what I will offer is that our intention is to make sure that self-employed people can be supported in exactly the same way as wage earners. And so if we are not doing that, we want to look at that and adjust our policies.
Thank you. I think that's just what Representative Sims wants to hear. Representative Anthony, I think you have the last word here, and then we're going to wrap up.
I can imagine visiting the office almost every 3 weeks as a self-employed person.
Mm-hmm.
But my question is to draw your attention to Section 16, and the title is Special Accommodations Grant.
Mm-hmm.
And I had asked during the run-through of or walkthrough, I guess, of the bill, whether, given that there is a specific list, accommodation grants, and I'm on page 21,
Mm-hmm.
And the list is rather customary, that is to say, eligible accommodations and then improved support training for the staff, blah, blah, blah. Any list has the danger of missing out on something that a legal beagle would say, but it's not there, so it's not eligible. And my question at the time was, what about folks for whom the barrier or special accommodation need goes over into transport? That is, it can't get to the center or the home. That's not on the list. And I would worry that access physically to whatever the services are would need to be accommodated for, but it's not, there's no language there.
Well, the good news is that is because there's a separate program that provides that provides transportation to children who are in who are eligible. So we have a program called Specialized Childcare. We have specialized childcare coordinators. This is embedded within our Children's Integrated Services work. We have specialized childcare coordinators in every region of the state, and they are the ones that would identify children that are in need of that transportation. We hold the contract, and we assign specific children rides. Good News Garage is one of our main vendors on that, to get those children to and from care.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
One quick one.
Quick one.
What ages does that cover? Does that, or is that all ages for that transportation?
That does cover 0 to 12, I think. So it does cover any of the children that could be potentially within the Child Care Financial Assistance Program eligibility.
Okay, good, thanks.
Yeah.
Representative Beck,
Yeah.
okay, and then, yeah.
And in section 2 of the bill, it talks about full year and, but we're talking public school and private provider. Is there two definitions of what full year means, or are they the same?
I would assume that if we're talking about that, I would love to talk about this, but that they're talking school day, school year is what I'm assuming they're talking about when they're talking about pre-K and ADM. I do just want to make sure that you guys do know that we really, from the administration's perspective, we really feel like dismantling the current universal pre-kindergarten system is really not the right direction to go, that there are there are good reasons why we chose to serve both 3 and 4-year-olds within the universal pre-kindergarten system, and that we have it set up in a mixed delivery way so that we're saying, we think that children before they get to kindergarten need this amount of sort of early learning support before they get to kindergarten. And that should be in the setting that makes the most sense for that family. And so, it doesn't make sense to say you have to leave your childcare program that can offer those services to go get pre-K services. And it has really big implications for children with disabilities, and for partnerships between school districts and childcare programs. And so I really, our sense is that we really haven't sort of vetted this pre-K4 idea as fully as we need to in terms of its implications for children. And I'm just offering that to you as something that we're really concerned about. So.
Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks all.
As more questions come up, we'll try to get them to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
We'll be back here for the floor. We're gonna spend much of the afternoon on S100. We don't have possession of it yet. It is still in environment and energy. We're just gonna get our head around the bill so that we are better prepared when we